My name is Rob Hogenklass. I'm the executive director of an organization called Justice Forward Virginia. We're a policy organization that attempts to enact more evidence-based criminal justice policies in Virginia. Things like abolishing the death penalty, legalizing marijuana, generally making the system less harsh than it has been for the last 30 years or so since we abolished parole and enacted treatment sentencing. As Shiva mentioned, she and I worked together starting in 2020. I think we initially met over Zoom and didn't meet in person for 2 years until we did a listening session together at one of those times when the pandemic seemed like maybe it was waning a bit. And then probably didn't see each other again for another 6 months after that. But now we get to do these events in person. It's a lot more fun. In 2020, Virginia experienced, like so many across the country, a moment when we had a reckoning with our criminal legal system. And there are folks, I see Ms. Kay here in the front row, folks who've been working on these issues for decades, who've been pushing on this issue specifically for decades. The late Congressman Peachin, who was a state senator back in the early 2000s, introduced a bill on this in 2005, attempting to allow expungement of some convictions. And just to put us in the sort of national focus for a moment, Virginia is one of only a handful of states that does not allow expungement or sealing of any criminal convictions. Only about 6 or 7 states are still that way. And we're going to move from being one of those states in 2 years, less than 2 years now, in 2025, we're going to be one of the few states that allows automatic sealing of some convictions, which will take us closer to the top rather than the bottom where we've been sitting for the last 30 years. So it's a big step in the right direction. I do want to mention just briefly the 1977 law, which is the current expungement law. There's a great handout that was produced by the Legal Services in Northern Virginia on how to go through that process step by step. If you're trying to do it on your own, it's a great guide. Highly recommend it. That law deals only with non-convictions. So cases that were null pros, cases that were dismissed, cases where you were found not guilty. There's also a provision for cases where someone used your identity, they stole your identity, and you had to go in and tell the court, I'm not the person that the officer arrested, that sort of thing. It's a useful law. It's not the greatest, but it is on the books now. I'm not going to spend the bulk of the time today talking about that law, but if you have questions about it, happy to answer that, because that's the only one we've been using for the last 35 years. So I do want to focus now on the difference between expungement and sealing, because I think a lot of people get hung up on that, and it is different from state to state. And by the way, as I go along, just raise your hand, interrupt me, you got a question. Can't possibly put out all the information in this 3-page presentation, so I'm happy to go on tangents. Yeah.
The current law, when you said non-conviction, would that include what you were charged with and you were not convicted with that, and it stays on your record and you were actually convicted of a lesser charge? Is that what you're talking about there?
So that's actually a difficult part of the law. So the question was, does this include the current law? Does that take care of things that you were charged with if you were ultimately convicted of a lesser included offense? And the answer is sometimes. So if you were charged with, say, assault on a law enforcement officer, which is a class 6 felony, and after looking at the facts, the Commonwealth's attorney decided to reduce it to disorderly conduct, and you pled guilty to that. You could expunge, under the old law, you could expunge the arrest for assault on law enforcement. But here's one of the strange things about the old law. If you ultimately pled guilty to assault and battery, which contains some of the same elements as the original charge, you cannot expunge the arrest for assault on law enforcement. So if you plead to something different than what you were charged with, you can expunge the original arrest. But if you plead to something that's within what you were charged with originally, then you can't. That's the answer. So expungement and sealing. As far as what happens to the physical file, so first of all, let me step back even one more time. When we're talking about criminal records today, we're talking about two different kinds of records. One is the police record. That record is held in something called the Central Criminal Records Exchange, which is housed at the headquarters of the Virginia State Police in Chesterfield. It's electronic. That is distributed to state, local law enforcement agencies. When a police officer is sitting in their car pulling up records on their laptop, they're looking at a version of the police record that comes from the state police, Central Criminal Records Exchange. You might call that the CCRE for short. It is a massive database of people's police records. It shows basic information like whether you were arrested, whether you were convicted, what you were charged with, the court, and dates. And that's about it. It's a pretty simple record. Then there's also the court record, the physical court record. So whether you were charged with a summons or a warrant or an indictment, and then the ultimate disposition of that case and anything that came in between, whether there was a motion to suppress or discovery or whatever, all the court records associated with the charges, those are housed at the individual courts. So we have 120 circuit courts, and in the Commonwealth, we have even more general district and juvenile and domestic relations courts. They each all have their own record of the criminal case. If it got that far, if you were charged and put before a judge, they're going to have their own record. So we're going to talk about two different records, and that's important because sometimes there's differences in how those different records are treated. When we talk about expunging a case, that means that the police record goes away completely. It is not to be shared with anyone. It's just, it is pushed into some electronic cabinet somewhere and nobody looks at it anymore. It's just gone. The court record continues to exist, but it's put into a file and only certain people in the clerk's office can get it if they have permission to do so. It is very rare that that happens. There's only one instance where an expunged record can be accessed, and that is if a prosecutor deems it necessary for an ongoing criminal investigation. They can ask for a court order to go in and get that. From a judge, yeah. That is the only time. I'm not sure if that happens. I'm looking at the Commonwealth's attorneys back there. I'm not sure if that happens. I don't know if they've ever had an experience with that.
It does happen every once in a while.
Every once in a while. Okay. I've never asked that. Okay. So, yeah.
Well, you said that court record remains?
The court record, yes, an expunged court record will stick around.
Where?
What's that?
Where would it be?
It'll be sealed in a file, in a paper file, in the clerk's office, and it'll be put in a cabinet, and where it will be marked as expunged, and only people with permission and a court order to open it can get to it.
So that's the jurisdiction for that particular court, or the general district or whatever.
Sorry?
The clerk's office in that jurisdiction.
Yes. Yep. Yep. And then if a prosecutor decided it was necessary for an ongoing criminal investigation, they could go to a judge and ask to open their file.
Thank you.
When a record will be sealed, we don't currently have any sealing laws that are in effect now. Juvenile's a little. We can talk about juvenile if you want, but that's a whole other thing. But if a record is sealed under the new law, then it will also be, the court record will, the electronic record will be cabined off in a corner, nobody will access it, the police record. And the court record will also be done the same thing as with an expunged record, where it will be closed up, marked as sealed, put in some cabinet in the courthouse. But there are going to be a few more reasons why a record could be unsealed than there were for get accessing an expunged record. So there are going to be instances, because we're dealing with criminal convictions, there are times when there are certain authorities who are going to be able to access those records that aren't able to for non-conviction records. And that's because federal law is different, and it's the supremacy clause, because we have a federal government that is over the states. There are times when the federal government demands to see convictions, even when the state law doesn't. So I'm talking about if you're applying to work, for example, at a bank. The banks are insured by something called the Federal Deposit Insurance Corporation, FDIC. FDIC has a regulation that says if you've worked at a bank, if you're going to work at a bank and you've ever pled guilty to or been convicted of a charge involving lying, cheating, or stealing, we need to know about that, because we're insuring that, the federal government is insuring that institution. If you're applying for a national security clearance to work with the CIA or the FBI or some agency like that, the federal government wants to know about that conviction. Even if it's been sealed under state law, they're going to find, the feds are going to find out about it. So there are going to be instances where records can be, convictions can be unsealed. But the advantages too are going to be huge. So let me just kind of take through the eligibility as far as what's going to be available to be sealed under this new law. So in the automatic side, this is the records that are going to be sealed automatically. You won't have to petition the court. The state police will just send lists of records to the courts, and the courts will seal them and tell the state police these records have been sealed. And then the court records and the police records will both be sealed in these cases. And these are all misdemeanors. So if you have only ever been charged with crimes but never convicted, all you have is non-convictions on your record, the new law will seal those non-convictions. And that's really excellent. It doesn't work for people who've only had non-convictions, or who have had non-convictions but also have some convictions. If you also have some convictions, this part of the law isn't going to apply to you. But if you are someone who has only ever been charged with crimes and you've never gone through the expungement process, because it is time intensive and resource intensive and takes a long time, the new sealing law will seal those non-conviction records. Then the convictions. So, and these are all after a 7-year period in which you had no new convictions. So if you have your conviction and then you go 7 years, if you had a petty larceny or a concealment, which is child, those charges will be automatically sealed. Marijuana possession or misdemeanor possession with intent to distribute, those are going to be automatically sealed. Trespass, I think there's 3 different kinds of trespass. Those are all included, in disorderly conduct. That is the group of charges that will be automatically sealed.
It doesn't matter how many you have, they will be.
As long as there's 7 years after the conviction in which you weren't convicted of any new crimes. Okay. Does that make sense? Yeah.
What about non-process cases where the Commonwealth non-process case didn't come back and charge a person a year later?
So I suppose it would depend on what happened with the second case. Because if you only had null process charges, and that was all that was on your record, then you would be in that group of non-convictions, and the new law will take care of all the non-convictions. But if you had a case that was null processed and then you later got a conviction, then you're gonna be in a different category. It's gonna depend, you know, what the conviction was and whether you would qualify for audit. All right. Then for the rest of the charges that are going to be eligible, it's all going to be by petition. And essentially it's the same process that we have for the current expungement law. And this is going to include all but two misdemeanors. So convictions of any type of misdemeanor except for two things, and those are DUI and assault and battery on a family or household member. And those, the patron told us he excluded those because of federal funding issues. They have to keep track of convictions for those two types of crimes in order to get some kinds of federal funding. Then we turn to felonies. And this is class 5, class 6, and felony larcenies are all going to be eligible under the new law. So class 5 is anything up to 10 years in prison. So that's like possession of a controlled substance. It's the one most frequently charged. Class 6, that could be assault on law enforcement, unlawful wounding. There's a lot of class 6. What's that? Are you saying like? Oh yeah, catalytic converter. Yeah, that's a process.
Stealing a catalytic converter.
Yeah.
I was going to repeat the questions
Oh sure.
for the mic.
Yeah.
Sorry. Some of the mic won't pick up some of the audience questions. No, I'm sorry about that.
This one, class 5,
Possession.
malicious.
Malicious
No,
wounding.
malicious wounding is class 3. So yeah, you know, when Shiva and I were talking to the reporter yesterday, we talked about all the people who worked on this and really poured their energy into trying to get this law. A lot of those people are not going to be eligible under the compromise that the legislators came up with. We're not totally satisfied with what we got. It's a big foot in the door that we can work on. You know, we've got the sort of apparatus set up now so that the state police got $14.5 million in order to implement this law. And they had to hire a lot of people and train a lot of people. And now we've got our foot in the door. So if we want to try to expand this in future years, we can work toward that. Because as I was saying yesterday, somebody who had a robbery, 30 years ago, they've been off probation for 25 years. They haven't had any new convictions. It is a shame that that person cannot go and get their records, or sealed. But the reality is, because a robbery 30 years ago carried a potential life sentence, that person is not going to be eligible. Yeah.
Excuse me. I'm glad you just said what you said, because the reason I'm here is because of this. I had a highway robbery charge when I was 19 years old, 42 years ago. The highway robbery charge is no longer on the book. The Hudson court where I got sentenced is closed. The judge is there, right? So to VCU Wellness Clinic, I speak to college students, young kids, dope fiends. I got an opportunity to get the internship in RBA. I went to class internship for 1 week. Got my CPR license and everything. They called me in the office. And they said, Mr. Cam, we see where you had the highway robbery job. August the 9th, 1969. And now, they said, we got to dismiss it. So I go down to John Marshall Court, because Hudson Court is closed. So I asked them, could I get my job responded? What could I do? They told me that I got to file for a pardon to the government. Okay, so now what I'm saying is this. Whatever I try to do, I'm 75 years old, February 25th, next year. And I've been trying to build a different lifestyle. I got up the game don't hold me nothing, I don't do that. I'm still doing fun for something when I was 19 years old. In other words, I'm walking around with my old penitentiary number, not physically, 09551 on my back right now, because I can't do nothing about this back. You know, I've had cocaine for 50 years. Been in the penitentiary 33 years, 10 times, but still not getting high. And I'm trying to today to be a productive citizen of the United States of America, and they keep going back when I was 19 years old. I don't think today like I thought when I was 19 years old. You know, I got more self-respect. I'm more humble. I'm more respect. And I can't love myself today when I didn't put that dope cocaine in my arm. So what did I supposed to do? That's what do you suggest for me to do about my people? Because as we know, the government that we have, we don't want extra citizens to have that right back. So the NAWCP, the ACLU, have a lawsuit on the government. See, when I come out of the penitentiary, because of getting my rights back, you have 602,000 people that rights back. And then they took it back because they said even Christian sign off for everybody. They took them back and did it. And that's how I've been going here since 2015. But I still don't feel complete with having my voting rights back. I still feel locked up walking around out in the street. So what do I supposed to do about something that they hold against me when I was 19 years old? And every time I take a step forward to help me, my race or anybody else, they close the door with it.
First, thank you. Thank you for sharing, thank you for doing what you do. There's a few things that I want to address. We have been working for almost a decade to try to change the barrier to crimes law. Senator Edwards has put his bill for every year, and it takes people like you to share, to come forward. We're doing a virtual event with Sarah next week on the 19th to talk exactly about what you're talking about. Because when I was 10 years old, both of my parents were arrested for robbery. My dad, non-violent offense, nobody was hurt, no weapon involved. Was sentenced to 38 years, and he did 19 and a half years in Greensville. And over the course of time, and I forget which year, maybe 2020, maybe 2021, degrees of robbery changed. What my dad could have been facing a life sentence for, it wouldn't have carried more than 5 years, I think. But he's still being vilified, and he still answers to that question every day. And when I lost my mom on election day in 2021, she and I both got our rights reinstated in 2013 under Governor McDonald. Each governor, from McDonald to McCullough to Northam, has consistently reinstated people's voting rights to make sure that people can not only vote, but run for public office,
Right.
serve as notary public, serve on juries.
That's right.
We avoid jury duty all the time, but if we're talking about a jury of our peers, we have to show up in those spaces and not just vote. We have an election every year, but the work comes after the election. Speak to the people who represent you. Tell them what you want. Don't let them tell you what they're going to do for you. Tell them what you need to have sustainable living. To change the barrier crime laws, to change the degrees of robbery, we all had to show up. Some of my colleagues are here that are part of the Expungement Council. We meet every 2 weeks to strategize around changing exactly what you're talking about so that you don't have to keep answering to that number. And as far as the lawsuits, we filed the first lawsuit. We filed the first lawsuit with Fair Elections Center because in my work with Nolef Turns, part of our program includes restoration rights and voter registration. Because we believe if a person is whole, and if we're going to make these changes in the policy, not just put a Band-Aid on a bullet wound and try to fund our way out of making sure that people have pure, sustainable lives that are, quantified by all of the opportunities that they deserve, we have to step up and share and continue to vote, serve on these boards and commissions, whether decisions are made about where the money goes. Because Virginia State Police has never upgraded their computer system. They were not prepared for this record sealing bill. And under the and the only reason they got the money to do this record sealing thing is because the state opted to legalize cannabis in attempts to make billions of dollars off the backs of people who have been penalized by the failed war on drugs in the past 50 years. We talk about 50 years of hip hop, and right now we're looking at 50 years of mass incarceration.
That's right.
Our communities were divested from programs taken away, parks and recs were closed. So many things were shut. Education has been divested from. But we put $1.8 billion with a B into Department of Corrections. We spend $13,333 on average to educate a child, but $33,000 to house a person in the Department of Corrections. And as the #2 employer behind Walmart, Department of Corrections runs 24 hours a day. So when we look at these policies and we talk about who represents us, and we think about all 200 representatives who are in the House and Senate who make the decisions about our everyday lives, and we talk about city council, and we talk about school boards, we talk about all of the pieces that bring this together. How we got to getting this bill passed and the compromises that were made were people like you stepping up and saying, yes, I have a conviction, or I have a lot of convictions.
Yeah.
But today, I'm pouring into my community and I'm doing better. So we will keep fighting to remove those barrier crimes so that you can give back to the people who need to hear your story. Because believe it or not, lived experience is just as good as any college degree. I'm not in college degrees. I have one, didn't do anything for me, but I paid a whole bunch of money for it. I got a 6-year student loan bill. But at any rate, that is what it takes to keep moving forward. That is how we got here. That is why a lay person like myself studied like how to break down barriers and everything. And it's not just with record sealing. I work to break down something every single day. So you got to do what you can do to bring this forward. But you got 2.3 million people behind you. You have 2/3 of the population behind you. 1 in 3 adults has some sort of record. If nobody steps up and says we have to change this for the better of the community, then guess what? People who have no contact with criminal legal systems will keep making decisions about something that they have no experience.
That's right. But you know what, though, if I had a bankroll, I'd be all right.
Not necessarily.
If I had a bankroll, that's scrapping some of that thing, everything disappears.
At this point in where we are in the criminal legal system, even having money can't always buy your way out of handcuffs. It helps for a lot of people. A lot of people are able to avoid accountability, but the people who are most accountable are the people who are the least resourced. But if we get rich, and I say we collectively because I'm here with you.
Right.
We break down these barriers by sharing and speaking of running for office, serving on boards and commissions, speaking to the people who represent us, or voting out the people who don't represent us and share our values.
Yes, ma'am.
Thank you.
So that was a good segue. Just want to introduce myself. I work here at the Law Library. My name is Charlie Schmidt, running recording and helping with logistics, but I also wear second hat as a pro bono attorney. What Sheba Williams was talking about with the Fair Election Center and the lawsuit for restoration of rights, particularly focused on voting rights and civil rights, as she said. The lawsuit is ongoing, and so I'm here afterwards, after this wraps up. If anybody is in the process of applying to have your rights restored, or knows of family members or folks that have been denied, or folks that are inquiring about it and inquiring about the lawsuit itself and what we're doing sort of as an additional project with Nolef Turns, the Fair Election Center, and others, just see me after this program, and I'm happy to fill you in on some details and that sort of thing.
My expectation for the investment prosecuting himself by email, violating confidentiality between me and my tenant. And I was convicted on that. No evidence, no nothing. Thinking back on what you said, sorry, Dan, these are several attorneys that Joe Marcy had, for Dan Lowe, Tommy Roberts. I talked to, like, it's pretty much, big time lawyer that knows that big cases. Right. Right about the opinion. I'm thinking back on you. Yeah. It's over $100,000. Yeah. The bank, they got to put the prosecutor to say what against the people. You got to put them on news and all that, to take care of the media and all that. Yeah. But this prosecutor, not to say that person bank right now, but they have a case right there, and they divided another big case in another jurisdiction. And that case is getting ready to come up for an appeal. When they violate that person in the process. So this prosecutor has a tendency
Stage.
of going to people maybe, they're going to the depository in jail and still in the middle to see which one your attorney is doing as far as the case of the crime. Right. So that's why I was convicted of the domestic case. The domestic case was I was charged with strangulation. They reduced it to a simple misdemeanor assault rather than a family. But I lost 2 jobs. Yeah. I lost a $60,000 credit. I lost a $150,000 house. Yeah. Because Virginia has this policy thing called equity. Right. Fine, attorney, I can do that, let you know. But this is a case that's going. I've been fighting this case 3 years. I went to General Assembly. I went to all these people I'm supposed to talk to, senators and everything. Right. No justice. So what do I do? The message was to see it as well. How do I go about going after the prosecutor or something like that for obstruction of correspondence? Which is the federal offense for 35 years. That was my mistake. And I've been to news outlets and everything. Well, on this side, channel 8, nothing. So I'm dealing, I guess I got to seal it or explain it or whatever. But how do I do justice? Because this prosecutor is even before us. A lot of jurisdictions. Right now, these records right here, this is my transcript right here. And also inside of one of these windows, I got the actual conversation of the actual conversation with the interrogating me and the federal agent telling me that if I can prove that the prosecutor did this, that they were making an arrest on the prosecutor. And I have no judge, but get out of 2 jobs. So how do I go about
Yeah, that's, I mean, I can't stand up and give specific legal advice on individual situations.
That's why I'm
It's-
thinking back. The attorneys that I talk to, big time attorneys or attorneys that handle
6 years up now, so it's a felony. Well, one time I got in trouble in October 3rd, 1999. I came home 2001. It's been an uphill battle. I've been getting good jobs, but once they see that I'm a felony, they just like they got let me go to the Capitol Police at the governor's building. I know Ms. She because she helped me get my rights back. But again, I would like mine to be gone. It's been 23 years since I had that. I have a couple of misdemeanors, but the felony is what's stopping me. I work in my community, which is a law academy court. I have a nonprofit organization called Mothers to Others. I just recently got on working with legal aid as a fellowship. I got my mentors, 2 of them here now, with support. So my thing with that is, I feel like it's hindering us because I have 4 boys. They're mixed, but they consider Black. So I wanted to get an LLC. I just found out that doing research, I can't get an LLC because I'm a felon. So how do I supposed to prosper and take care of my kids and get out of no privacy when I'm being suppressed that a crime that I did 20 years ago, and I'm still paying for it today. So I'm pushing also to show my board, you make mistakes, we human. But how long do we have to pay for?
It depends on, yes, I know it's more, but I don't get into like the piece of like what a person has done, but I look at what a person is today. So I don't know the specifics, but it really depends on what the condition is and if it will qualify in 2025. Right now, there is no relief. That won't qualify, but like, I know you're not saying we are the people. Expungement council is working to change that. It's gonna take a lot of people to step up and say, this is what this is doing to my life, this is where I am today, this is what I've accomplished. Because like in my situation, I was fired from a job that I worked for 10 years, never took a vacation. Me and my mom was diagnosed with colon cancer. I used to make my days off to travel back and forth to Richmond from Norfolk to make sure that she was good. But they fired me on the spot when they realized I had a conviction. And I was convicted after I was hired, so I did not write in the application. It didn't matter. Medicaid law said if you have a felony, you can't work in certain positions. So I became a barber and self-employed, working for myself. But Department of Professional Occupational Regulation took my license away for 16 months in 2016, and I had to defend it. And all this, so they tell you there's this thing called an informal fact-finding hearing for people who want professional licensing for things that they're trying to do. It is not informal. It is two attorneys and a court reporter, and they walk into a room like you're in a deposition, and I wasn't prepared for it, and I was pissed. So I talked to Delegate Bagby about changing some of those laws, and I don't know if y'all know Delegate Bagby doesn't nothing came to fruition behind that. But I go back every year. I talk to as many legislators as possible about all of the things. There are so many barriers. There are 46,000 collateral consequences that come behind any condition, and sometimes an arrest. So I said all that to say, like, it takes you talking to the people who make the decisions or removing the people who will not make the changes that are necessary for what you need. What we need is an expansion of the current expungement law, and yes, we haven't implemented it yet, but we still have so many people who are doing amazing things today and present day. And we talk about brain development in people under 25, but we have people who change and grow at the age of 50 and 60 and 70. Nobody is who they were yesterday. I can't even remember yesterday sometimes, but I'm not the same person that I was last week. I'm not going to be the same person tomorrow. In law, you only have to get it wrong one time. In life, we give grace and mercy. We talk about grace, mercy, and redemption and faith, and we talk about it with like law enforcement. And I'm not pitting one against the other, but we give so many second chances to people who are deemed worthy. Everybody is worthy. And if we don't go and say this is what we need for our communities, this is what we need to be successful and thrive and take care of our babies, because everybody's talking about the youth this, the youth that. The parents who are dealing with these convictions have a direct impact on what the progress is of young people coming up. So, I say we have to keep fighting, but right now there is no relief. There is no relief for any conviction period, but we keep fighting to expand it, and that's kind of all I got here in this Commonwealth of Virginia. Ms. Kate.
Hi. Ma'am, I just want to tell you, everybody here, I've never been convicted, I don't know. But let me let you first tell you, you're more than your mistake. I say that to prisoners and everybody else, you are more than your mistake. The other thing is, we need to stop, you said you're a felony. No, you're not. You are a person. You're a person that committed a felony offense. Just like we need to tell those that are, stop saying, I'm a violent offender. You committed a violent offense. That is a difference. When you go in front of people and explaining yourself and telling people who you are, you want them to recognize who you are today, you're not a violent offender. You're not a violent person. You committed a violent act at some point in time. And you are more than what you are, than what your mistake that you made. And I pray for you, I pray for them. I try to do the work to try to make a difference.
Thank you.
I just wanted to say that to you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
My name is Pamela. And I heard everyone talking, but I just want to share.
I was charged with, when this is when the fire. And I went to court and dropped it down to the, unlawful wound, so they took the fire charge away. So over the course of the years, I always, I wanted to be a nurse, so RN. But because of my felony, I could, they wouldn't even let me fill out the application for, to become an RN. I did get in other trouble after because of that, because I wasn't using that. So, I got clean in 1996, which in October I have 27 years.
Amen.
I'm still under the hope. 2006, I got my rights restored. After that, I applied for a simple part. I got returned down for that. So she told me to back me, and I did, which has been years. But so since I could work as a nurse, I did get my CNA license, which is a certified nursing assistant, and I can understand. I worked 30 days, got fired after 90 days, for everything with 2 little girls. But I didn't give up. I just kept, I stayed clean. I kept going. I applied for the simple part. I hadn't heard none of it, so it just keep calling every other month, which I did. I've been calling for about 10 years, a long time. 2 months ago, I got a call. I got a simple party for ornament. Strategies for the unlawful movement. And I had other misdemeanors, church, on drug property and stuff like that. So, you know, I was working at RBHA and I was sitting there listening to your sound like, where they hire me for the manager worker. But now I'm no longer at RBHA. Now I work with at and I just wanted to share that I know it can happen because it happened for me. Right. So now my next process is trying to see if I can just simplify it. Like I said, I had 12 charges all about. And finally, every last one of them, they simplified. I went and got the prison at the state police, and everything started this way. It take a little while for a to show up. Me, I want to know, like, what is my next step? Is there the next step that I can do? Or is that getting fun? Because even though, October 2nd, my goal is to still get into RN, go to become an RN. And right now, for the last 7 years, I've been working as a certified peer coverage specialist, which I help with people in housing, just advocating for everything that can. So if it's something that I can do or something I can share or whatever, I would like to talk to you sure after and give some, my information, because I want to help this way. But I just wanted to share. And I was sitting here and I just been listening to all this, and I was like, wow. And at first I said, I don't even say nothing because I hear, stuff, but I just wanted to share that because I know it may take a while, but it can happen.
because it happened for me, which I had been, and like I said, I couldn't give up, because I had 2 little girls, and then like 4 years later, I had 5 kids, and I took on my sister's 3 kids. You know, making $9.50 an hour. So I just want to share this with you.
Quick question. Sorry if I missed it, if you went over it in your presentation, but so when the automatic sealing starts for certain things in 2025, does it make any, is there any benefit to go ahead and petitioning for full expungement, or like go through the petition, or it's the same process as they'll just do it automatically? You know, is there any benefit, like, you know, pulling the record totally from existence, or any benefit, any difference or benefit to between the automatic sealing and what will be a petition?
No, I mean, because expungement is only for non-convictions. It's only for cases that were dropped or dismissed or acquitted.
Gotcha.
The automatic sealing of the convictions is not available through the expungement process. So, you know, when the state police sends those records, that automatic process is going to be a lot simpler and a lot better than through the courts.
Right.
Now, I will say, you might not be notified by this administration, just to figure it out. Because I don't think that they are setting up to make sure that people know that this is an option and this is a thing. So.
I was a little bit late time for this. What do you know about people where you say like no contest? I both eligible for it.
So it depends on what the conviction is. Pleading no contest is essentially taking a deal with it. It's just saying that.
Yeah,
I'm not admitting to that, but I know, but it's ultimately a conviction.
Yeah, it's more dependent on what the charge was than it is on what the pled. So you can plead not guilty, but still be found guilty. You can plead no contest, you can be found guilty. You can plead guilty and be found guilty. There's lots of ways to be found guilty. It ultimately, what it comes down to is what the charge that you were convicted of was. So you look at this first page of the presentation, you know, misdemeanors, almost all misdemeanors are going to be eligible for sealing. Class 5, Class 6 felonies, and larceny felonies. Anything above that is not.
I have indecent exposure. I got hot flu when I was 19.
So again, not given specific legal advice, but I can say indecent exposure, in my experience, is a misdemeanor, class 1 misdemeanor. So if it was a misdemeanor, if you're saying you were, I haven't looked at the documents obviously, but if you're saying you're convicted of a misdemeanor offense, that's going to be eligible under the petition base.
Starting in 2025.
Yeah, the law takes effect July 1st, 2025. Yes.
Okay, so actually was based on this presentation, but what I'm gathering, expungement does not help someone who has any kind of felony at all in the case. Is there anything else that a person can do that has felony, even if it's a little F, that will prevent like this, we'll say race city or state from continuously punishing people by, continuously, putting it up whenever it's convenient to take people away from their jobs, take people away from their livelihoods, because of the fact that whenever it's convenient, they pull this up. Is there anything else that can be done that can help somebody be able to alleviate that? I know expungement will not do that. But is there anything else, like any other recourse that person has?
So the pardon process, and it really depends on the employee, if you're talking about employee.
The city is like the Board of Education.
So
you cannot become a janitor with the job. It's not supposed to.
The simple pardon process would be your best route. And when you say expungement won't help felonies, it won't help all felonies, but it does help low level felonies. It
With
doesn't
low
take
level.
effect until 2025, in class 5 and 6 and some unclassified.
Some larceny.
And larceny, stuff like that. But when you apply for the simple pardon, the employer agrees a lot of times beforehand to say, if this pardon will be eligible to hire. Our very first pardon that we did was a young lady who worked for Jewish Community Center for years, for over a decade. And she got laid off for a little while, and it had been over a year. And after that year, they called her back for recall, is what they called it. And they did a background check. They did a second background check, even though she had been working there for over a decade. And just so happened her last assignment was with one of our local nephrologists who was prominent, what have you. And she worked with him until his wife passed. She put in her application, they did a background check, and they immediately let her go. She came to me when we first started this organization in 2016. I'm talking about a month shy of starting the organization. And we put in this partner, it took 3 years. And I remember the day I was doing homemaking at the governor's office. And the then Secretary of the Commonwealth, Kelly Thompson, came to speak. And I said, hey, Kelly, I need an update on my partner for my lady. And she said, oh, let me go check. And she never came back. And I was cussing in my head because I'm a little childish. And I was like, I don't know why he didn't come back, you know, whatever. They granted my person her pardon while I was upstairs, and she was downstairs getting her pardon. Her job opted to hire her back. And the only problem was they opted to hire her back at the same rate that she was making 3 years prior, which was not a sustainable wage, but it works. It really works if that's what you're trying to do. It takes some time. It can take anywhere from 3 to 5, and I've never heard 10 years, but it takes some time for this pardon to take effect, and you're expected to still be productive and still live a life that is productive, but speak to your employer and let them know that you're seeking to get letters of recommendation. Happy to help with the process, that's what we do. But that is a means of getting it. And there are 3 different types of pardons for people who are not aware. The simple pardon, which is the one that is granted the most, just says, hey, your government forgives you for whatever indiscretion is there. It seems crazy, but that is what gets you in the door of a lot of jobs, not necessarily housing experience, but it helps. The next pardon is a conditional pardon, which is for people who are incarcerated, and the governor grants release, early release for some things. There's also a medical pardon, which comes in the conditional pardon when a person is ill inside the Department of Corrections. And then the absolute pardon, less than 1% of Virginians have ever gotten it, because the state has to admit that they made an error of rape, justice, and law to give a person absolute pardon. And you can be found guilty. You can go through the innocence project and you can prove that, and you still have to fight for this absolute pardon, and you may still be denied. So simple pardon is what I suggest for you in the interim until we get to 2020.
Can you explain a little about the petition process? Is that
Sure.
something you file with the court? Is it a hearing, or can somebody do that on their
Yeah.
own?
So I'll skip.
No, sorry.
Okay.
Sorry.
So on page 3 of the presentation is the sort of petition process. So let's take the felony, the class 5, class 6 larceny felonies down at the bottom. If you're convicted of a class 5, class 6 or felony larceny, and it's been 10 years since your conviction, in that time, you haven't been convicted of anything that gets reported to the CCRE. Just pause for a moment on that. So things that are not reported to the CCRE would be like driving on a suspended license, reckless driving. Most driving offenses, alcohol offenses, those are not going to hold you back. Now, if you've had another felony or another misdemeanor conviction in the interim 10 years, then it's going to be a problem. But assuming you went 10 years and haven't had any new convictions, then you're likely eligible in your petition. When you petition, you can get an attorney. Under the new law, and this is something I haven't mentioned yet, under the new law, if you can't afford an attorney to represent you in the sealing process, you can ask the court to appoint you. So this is the first time I'm aware of in Virginia where you're filing a civil case and you're going to be able to ask for an attorney and the court will have to appoint one for you if you can't afford a lawyer to represent you in the civil process. Yes.
Along that same line, what is generally the type of fee that is, that a lawyer will ask for to help you go through the process of doing this?
I've heard, I mean, I have heard anywhere from 500 or 1,000 up to 2,500 for a single case for the old expungement law. I think anywhere between 1,000 and 2,500 is probably what I would expect. Is
So I heard Ms. Shu say that, okay, they y'all fought for the misdemeanors to get expunged. Okay, is there any way that we can go talk to the legislation and see if they will be on board to say, like, if it's 20 years old or 10 years old, would they be willing to balance, say like, okay, we'll take it away. You haven't got in no trouble, you're doing good, as to have it on your record. You understand what I'm trying to say?
Yeah.
Like,
So
say, okay, well, we come to you, well, I don't got a record this long.
So you're talking about one of those, if you go back to that first page down there with the red box where it says ineligible offenses, you're talking about one of those charges that's ineligible under the new law, but it's been so long since that thing happened. I think this is the one that we keep hearing over and over again, and that the Expungement Council, pushed for so hard when we were passing this law in 2021, is to try and expand the range of offenses that would be eligible. Because like that gentleman who was here earlier, 45 years ago, he was convicted of a robbery when he was 19. Now he's in his 70s. I'm not doing the math right, but
So what is the difference of companies have felonies and getting that extra pay than to just invest and letting somebody and letting that person live their life without that felony over their head?
So
They
there's a couple of things.
Yes, ma'am.
What you're talking about is the Workforce Opportunity Investment Act that gives incentives for employers to hire people who are who have justice involvement, who are displaced workers, who are urban farmers, who are elderly, disabled, et cetera, et cetera. There's a tax incentive to hire people who have certain convictions. When you're talking about expanding the law, we didn't just fight for misdemeanors, because I fight for everybody. I don't discriminate. We fought for the felonies, and that is how the felonies were also included. The felonies that are included were also included. The Expungement Council, who is made, okay, let's go back. It was initially attorneys and people who have lived experience, and it is people from all over the state who come together over Zoom. I don't think we all met for 2 or 3 years, but we go to crime commission meetings, we talk to the legislators, we set up meetings with them. We keep pushing to expand, to include other offenses, more offenses, because like you said, time is a factor that makes all of the difference. And a big thing, and I say this all the time, my mom was 63 when she passed. And she was living in Richmond Development property over on 27th Street in Southside, and they were going to renovate. And they said, oh, we can pay for you to move out temporarily, we can apply for another apartment. And she went to the apartments that are now, used to be don't ask me, I know old Richmond, that's all. And they denied her. 63 years old, for something that happened when I was 10. I'm 25, don't do the math the way that you need to do the math, but it's been a long time. That time. In real life, it's been 34 years, and she was still being denied housing for something that she was convicted of in 1989. My mother was working the election every year since she got her rights reinstated, volunteering, helping in community, working with our organization, doing mentoring. She traveled all over the country with her job. She was a caregiver for every person in my family that passed before she passed, even my paternal grandmother. My mom took care of her. So the integrity of the person makes all the difference. And people who make the decisions about the law, and what's excluded and what's not, need to know that there are people in Virginia who contribute to this society and the betterment of this society who need those things to be done. But we didn't have a lot of people showing up to support us. It was a small group of us who were showing up consistently, saying this is what we need for every single person in the state of Virginia, not just violent versus non-violent, because I don't subscribe to that notion, because everybody that I love has a bodily condition, and they're also the best part of my life. I'm talking about my parents, I'm talking about my best friend, I'm talking about my sister, I'm talking about my thankfully ex, I'm talking about my friends. They happen to be in positions in society where conditions led to what happened, but they still contribute the most of anybody I know. And if we gonna keep it up all the way 100, there are people who have multiple misdemeanors, and get in trouble over and over and over and over again. And that does not mean that they're not redeemed. Every single person deserves a good quality of life. So we didn't just fight for misdemeanors, we fought for everybody to be included, and we got cards, like we get with anything in criminal legal system. So we're gonna keep fighting. So join the Expungement Council. I'm here. Macy is here. Question.
Why does it take so long for the law to change? People are home, and people need jobs, and they are like 2025 is great for the like. I think like struggle and get whatever I can until they were like.
So the technical answer is Virginia has never upgraded their computer system. They were operating off of MS-DOS when we pushed forward this legislation, and they got $12.5 million initially to start the process. They will receive another $12.5 million. We're not sure how much the clerks will get, but they're requesting a lot more money to upgrade a system that has never been upgraded. Hasn't been updated since before I was born.
So like,
that
they
takes
don't
time.
care. They don't care.
Well,
It doesn't matter what what's happened here, is that the unemployment system was the worst in the country, especially during the pandemic. And nothing has been done about that. Nothing, we do have people, and you said, we need to let the legislatures know, they know, just don't care.
well,
Because it's not in this kind of situation. They don't talk to us. They don't really care because they already have something going on for themselves, and they keep it within the old boy network.
that's right. In this situation, they don't have a lot of choice but to care, because it was mandated by law based on feedback from the community. And they got the money to do it. And there are some people at Virginia State Police and across the systems who are working to upgrade the system. And we tried really hard to say, increase, bring the state earlier, and experts in coding and Delegate Hudson, who graduated from MIT, who has a background in history in these systems, said that on average, this is reasonable, that 4-year period. So yes, people are still suffering, people are still being denied employment, housing, education, all kinds of things, but they're working.
I get the sort of hopelessness part of it,
But not hopeless,
anger. It's fair. It's fair. I just want to say, when we were working on this bill in 2020, the Senate bill said if you were convicted of 3 different misdemeanors, underage possession of alcohol, possession of marijuana, or using a false ID to obtain alcohol, those were the 3 misdemeanors. Only if you committed them between the ages of 18 and 21, only if you paid all your court debt off, and you were convicted of those misdemeanors, then you would be eligible for expungement. That's where we started. That was the bill that was proposed and passed the Senate unanimously in the 2020 special session. Then we had a House bill that had 100 and some misdemeanors that were going to be automatically expunged. And they were so far apart that the House and Senate couldn't possibly agree. We came back in 2021 and we got 8 different misdemeanors that you can seal automatically, convictions. And then we got all but 2 misdemeanors that will be sealable by petition. And then we got class 5, and we got class 6, and we got felony larcenies by petition. So that was how much the needle moved in just 6 months. And I think we can do that again. We can keep expanding that. Now that we've got the foot in the door, we got the apparatus set up, the state police has spent that money to produce this system, the clerks are gonna have to adjust. And we got our foot in the door, and we can keep working on that in the future. We gotta, this is a first step. It's a first step. And so I'm hopeful, as long as Sheba and I and others are around, we're gonna keep working on expanding this and until we help the people that need help. I'm not sure I fully answered your question about the petition process.
Yeah, I wanted, I think you're getting there, but.
Yeah, I was getting there.
A hearing with witnesses.
So you file a petition in circuit court, and this would be for nearly every misdemeanor and then the felonies that are eligible by petition. So you file petition in circuit court, it's got to be served on the Commonwealth's attorney. And then you don't have to get fingerprinted anymore. You got rid of that part. As of July 1st, there's no more fingerprint requirement for expungement or seeking. So then you ask the state police to send your record to the court. That takes a little while. But then the Commonwealth will weigh in. If you've got a prosecutor who is open to the idea that what's that? Oh, I'm going too fast? I'm sorry.
Now, after you don't have to get fingerprint, you do the next step with what?
Okay, so you file a petition, then the petition, you have it served, usually the sheriff or a process server will serve it on the Commonwealth's attorney. They can also, I think, waive service of process. They can just accept it if they're open to that idea. I think Ms. Peach said that she would do that in the past in some cases.
She worked very hard. I can't say, can you work with us? Stand up.
She said, raise your hand. She's coming over, turning each.
Oh, Ms. McKeachin.
Yeah, she's, they get the file, the court has a copy, the Commonwealth has a copy, and then the next step is you have to call the state police or send them a letter and ask them to transmit your record, your police record to the court. Mm-hmm.
Now, I don't want to hold up the meeting and stuff, but I used to work for Allied University Security, and I worked in the City Hall, and I also worked in the parking deck, which got the lottery board, but I was in the deck counting parking spaces. And they pulled me, the state police did, and I still have my paperwork to this day. They wanted me to kill it, and I lost. So can I take that same paperwork back to them and do this process with it, or I have to start from the beginning and do the whole process?
I'm not following.
You talk, when you say they pulled you, you talking about traffic offense? When you say they pulled you, are you talking about traffic offense?
No, I was working in a building that was a clearance too, I believe, and I could be in that building. So they sent me a letter to appeal the state police did.
Well, maybe we can talk about that after. But so you ask the state police to send your police record to the court.
Can I ask you a question, just because somebody's asking me online?
Sure.
They're asking why does it have to be all these transfers and sending it? Because they've already had access to your fingerprint when you get locked up. So they're asking why do they have to do all of that process that's taking a long time? Because each entity that you're talking about already has access to your fingerprint because they take it when they lock you up. So I'm just asking a question that they asked me to ask. So the fingerprint requirement has been removed, but the other process are typical Virginia red tape. Yes, that is just what it's always been.
We do think that the new process is going to be less cumbersome than it was before. Before, you had to go down to a law enforcement agency, often the same one where you were arrested, and do your fingerprints, even though they already have it. Like you said, they already have it. You do your fingerprints, and then that card goes off to the state police. never understood that process. So at least now you don't have to do the thing, which can cost, if you got multiple charges, $10 for the first one, and $5 for each fingerprint card. So we got rid of the cost part and the fingerprinting process part. There's always improvements that can be made, but we're trying. So let me just get through the petition process, and then we can go back to questions. So once the court then has your police file, then the case can kind of start moving like a regular court case again. And then you know, you have a conversation with the Commonwealth's attorney to see if they're going to object, or they might just go ahead and file their objection. And then you have to set a hearing, go to court, and then it's a discussion about whether it would be a manifest injustice for this charge to stay on your record. And if you can show why this conviction has been a problem for you and why it will continue to be a problem in the future, then you know, the judge will consider that in deciding whether it would be a manifest injustice for that record to continue to be shared versus having it off the record.
So just bring
So
receipt.
that's, what happens to this whole, is that available to the public, this whole petition? I guess that goes, if you're sealed, it will go with the rest of the information. And like, what happens to the
the
court
civil case,
record, is that whole petition?
the civil case will be under seal.
It will be, okay,
Mhm.
all right.
Mhm.
I think I have to plug, like, the Commonwealth Attorney's Office partnered with us for this event to do this education, the Richmond Commonwealth Attorney's Office. There are some Commonwealth attorneys who are on board and who have been like instrumental in making sure that these processes run smoothly and they don't deny most people. There are some who still got to work on, like always. There are some who will oppose everything, and we used to have to fight with Richmond to address things being opposed. But there are a lot of Commonwealth attorneys who are making the process easier as they're being educated about what this does and what it means for people. So each locality has the authority to do their own thing. This locality, Henrico, Albemarle, Charlottesville, Portsmouth, Norfolk, some other localities have like committed to making the process as simple as possible with their impact. It doesn't mean that everybody will get what they want the first time. But for the most part, we know that there's less red tape with most localities. So you're not saying, or do we get the petition process?
And that petition is in where the conviction occurred.
Yes, has to be filed in the court where the conviction is.
Oh, I was just trying to put my hand on
Oh,
my head. Sorry.
Yes.
I can introduce myself.
Okay.
My name is Johan Whitaker. I'm an organizer at the Legal Aid Justice Center. It's really a pleasure to be here with all of you who are seeking justice and remedy for our people. It's always a pleasure to be with Sheba, Rob, and others who have been working a really long time to expand access to justice for our people. I was an organizer with the Virginia Expungement Council. It's the group that Sheba and Rob mentioned. And we're working to to make sure that criminal records are no longer barriers to education, employment, housing, food, and to taking care of our families. And we know that like a lot of people commit harm because our support systems through housing, education, family, etc., have been taken away from us by an illegal and a corrupt system. Right? It's illegal for our people. Right? It's legal for our people to be unhoused. It's legal for our people to be hungry. It's legal for our people to face injustice because the system itself is corrupt. And what we need is more and more people like you standing up, coming together in organizations to demand justice. They're not going to get it to us if we don't demand it. So, I speak for myself, we all like going to parties or to the cookout or to an event like this, but we need more people to help plan those events and to come together collectively. This is a really awesome event, but we need help. We can't do it alone and we can't do it without you. So everybody has a part to play. It might be, bringing the groups to meetings. It might be inviting new people into the meeting, but we need to come together. We need more people at the Expungement Council so that we can, demand justice. The prosecutors also have a part to play, right? They can stop if there are things that are going to be automatically eligible for record sealing. they could stop prosecuting us for that. They could go back and redress the convictions that they've already charged people if it's automatic record sealing or, eligible for expungement. And they can actively support expungement and record sealing in the courtroom by refusing to object. Because every time we go to petition, right, that's a step that they can say yes or no. They can remove themselves from that process if they're not going to object to any records in the petition. But that's a choice they have to make. And my argument is they're not going to make it to the mandate. So, I'll be here. She was here. Rob's here. Nora, Keisha, Maisie, other of us are here. Happy to give out my contact information. You can take my number now or my email. But yeah, we just need more of you. It's so great that this room is full. But we need to pack out every room, every committee hearing, every prosecutor's office. We need you. So join us and help us. Thank you.
And I'll send all the emails from the registration list. Yeah.
Yes.
The process is what you described. Do you move the lawyer at any point during it?
Probably.
Like,
It's a complicated, it's a complicated
petition
process.
Things and get the police, the state police.
I will
say my record, I need a lawyer.
I will say, I've done dozens of expungement cases under the old law, and every case seems to work differently in different courts. The process seems to be different. Some courts, they call you with a court date and say, here are the available dates. In other courts, you got to file something else and ask for a court date and show up at a doctor call. It's just, the legal system is complicated. And the new law, one of the great features of it, and I think it's the only one in the country like this, I've asked around and nobody seems to have heard of this, is that there is going to be court-appointed counsel. If you can't afford a lawyer, when you're wanting to petition for sealing, you can just ask the court for one, and they're going to have to give you a lawyer if you can't afford one.
In 2025.
In 2025.
What about now? Like, if I want to petition now, can I?
You can't,
on my own, but
you can't get a conviction sealed before July 1st, 2025.
Only non-convictions right now.
It's fine.
Charlie.
I just had, sorry, just to follow up on, when you talk about the process and requesting your criminal history from the state police is, I was trying to look online and went down rabbit hole. Is there a form? Is it just a letter to a particular department? Like in your experience, how long does it take to, does it, like, I know it's all different, but.
So the law just changed on that on July 1st when we got rid of
Oh,
the
right, okay.
fingerprint requirement.
Okay.
Under the old expungement law. And I called Jim Williams at the state police, who was the head of the expungement section. And I called him on like June 26th or so and said, hey, what about this new law? And he said, what new law?
Oh,
They had not heard of it yet. So there is no process yet. He's just operating until somebody above him tells him something.
right, because their website and their forms and everything are all outdated.
The way I'm gonna handle it is just, if I've got a case, I don't need fingerprints to get that case done. I'm gonna send him a letter and say, please transmit the record for this person to the court.
Okay.
And for the automatic sealing, if that doesn't happen, I envision a scenario where that doesn't happen. Is there a remedy for?
Yeah, you can still go through the petition process.
Okay.
Yeah, if for some reason the automatic gets held up and you're still seeing the record, then you can go through the petition process.
Everything y'all been doing is very good. Like, it's nice.
Thank you.
Awesome. And I
Very
need to keep it up. Keep doing it. I'm actually a criminal justice student at LW Wilder, BCU. And I'm actually going to my junior year. And I have plans to attend law school if you're hoping. Yeah, so I do a lot of work for criminal justice as well. Thank you. Yes, over my own law firm.
I got a daughter that's a criminal justice student at BCU. I don't know how she's gonna be. She's gonna argue with you.
Yeah, I'm actually the president of our
Okay, yeah. Come get her. Get her out my house.
Is there a question about?
So we're from Wyoming County. We are.
Oh, wow.
Yeah, And so if you have a couple of misdemeanors, on that, where it automatically comes off down the road, who chooses which ones come off? Does someone work, does it just go by date, or how does that work?
So for it to come off automatically, there's one eligibility requirement, which is you can't have any new convictions within 7 years of your
Right.
conviction. So let's say you had a marijuana possession charge in 2006, and then you had a shoplifting in 2014. Both of those are going to come off automatically.
And what if there's another one? Does that one not come off? Does only two come off on the automatic?
So one thing we haven't talked about yet is the lifetime limit.
Right.
So there are convictions, but if you can get convictions sealed from 2 different sentencing events.
Meaning there was 3 different charges in one case, that case would be a lifetime.
That would be one sentencing event. If you had a larceny and a marijuana possession and a disorderly conduct all at the same time, all 3 of those are eligible for automatic. They would all come off automatically, and that would only count as one.
And that's for the automatic sealing too.
Mhm.
It
Yeah,
doesn't
that is the
matter
automatic
whether you petition the court to have it sealed, or if it comes off automatically, in 25, you could still only have 2.
I think there's an argument that the automatic shouldn't count toward the lifetime limit, and I plan to make that argument if I have those cases. There is a provision now that says that marijuana paraphernalia and underage possession of alcohol absolutely do not count toward the lifetime limit. So there's some charges that are not going to count at all, and I think the automatic ones shouldn't count either.
Meaning that they don't have, meaning they'll still come off and then you still get your.
You still get 2 other sentencing
So
events.
that's kind of free.
I think that's going to be an argument, the issue that's got to be settled by the Court of Appeals.
And then one question, so we talked to several lawyers out just to get some guidance and some help. And we either don't get a phone call back, or legal assistant calls back and says, oh, well, just wait till 2025. And she's trying to apply nursing school in your same situation, and can't even get, like, the school won't even take her because she has a record, even though there are minor things, much minor things. And so how do we find an attorney in our area, because it's all within our Loudoun County? How do you find an attorney that knows what the heck is going on and is aligned with, you know, with what you guys are doing, so that you're getting good good help?
If you can stick around later, I've got an idea.
Okay. Sorry.
Yes, sir.
This has been very informative, I appreciate it. Also, when is the next expungement council meeting?
Johanse's
We'll be meeting on Zoom on the 30th. No, the 2nd.
We did not meet on the second.
We met on the 9th, sorry. Okay, yes, we met on the 9th. So our next meeting is July 30th at 2 p.m. And we meet virtually on Zoom because we have a lot of people from across the state, like Northern Virginia, Central Virginia, South Virginia. And if you actually give me my telephone number, just text me, and we can have a conversation and set up on the Zoom. My telephone number is 424-422-0057. And just like shoot me a note or a text to say, you know, hey, we're at this expungement clinic that you've been around did, and then we'll get connected. But our next meeting is July 30th at 2 p.m. I think that's the last Sunday of the month. Yeah, I look forward to having you. Yeah, 434-422-0057, and I'll be here after to talk on.
Back.
Sure, okay, Yohance, YOHANCE, at justice, the number 4, all.org.
Just like to say what it's running, what a copy of all the, you know, how would it individual know? Like say they got, just say they got like 8 convictions, and they like, okay, which one falls in this category? How would the person know?
That's a great question.
I know, that's a
So,
great question.
one, I think I brought this up yesterday with WTBR. We have an administration and an attorney general who could be extremely helpful right now in explaining how this law is going to work for the people, the many, more than 1 million potential people who are going to be impacted by this law in some way. They could be out there telling us how it's going to work and who's going to be eligible and how to take these steps. And instead, you get cheap red meat. In that story yesterday, the Attorney General's office referred people to the people who, the legislators who brought the legislation in 2021.
Just, this is Virginia. In Pennsylvania and Utah, I have good friends in Utah that run Rise of Eagle and Queensland, Utah. There are New Jersey, a notification system. A lot of it falls on community-based organizations. The administration, this administration specifically, will not take accountability. The Attorney General's response was, we can't give independent legal advice. It's not independent. It is public service. It is the will of the community, and it's for the benefit of the people of this Commonwealth to know where they stand when this process takes place.
Come on.
They refuse to do the work, so we pick up the pieces. But we don't have limitless resources, and we don't have access to everybody across the state. So I put my 4 wheels on the ground and I travel across the state. Can't go everywhere. That is why we give all of the information to the masses to share, and we're always saying, I might be unfit, I might not answer right away. You might have to send me messages a couple of times, but I try to respond when I can. But like, let's be clear, this should not be, the burden should not lie on us. But we are passionate enough about this that we take the time to educate ourselves, educate others. And I'm not a person who goes on to any information because I don't really do that. You know, I'm relying on y'all to pass on information. Or at the very least, to say, get in touch with these people because they know this process and share with somebody else. That is what this is about. This is about empowering the community because our government will not do the empowerment of people. And that's how it's always been.
And I mentioned that I think we both talked about the various steps that it took to get to this law that we got in 2021. One step I left out is in 2022, there was a new set of legislators that came into office. The first thing they did was file a bill to repeal the entire law. With 3 years before it even took effect, they wanted to repeal the entire law that we had just worked for years to get. So, there's folks out there who don't want this to happen.
Right.
And
I
we
think
just
with
got
other bills too that they have to repeal, it just wasn't this one.
no, it was a lot. Yeah, it was a lot.
I just got some. I'm gonna piggyback off of Ms. Tamara. She said, how do you know which misdemeanor to put in that group? Okay, say if you got 8 misdemeanors and they all domestic violence, wouldn't that still be the same as a felony with a malicious wound? Assault and battery? I mean to say.
I just have to say, yeah, it depends on the charge. I would just say if we got specific questions about specific charges, then we're getting close to legal advice, and I just don't want to. I'm going to have to talk to a lawyer about your individual situation.
Okay, I get it.
I'm trying to ask the question, but it's off. I can't find it. I think they were asking to ask the Commonwealth attorney, why is, I know she's not here, but they could possibly answer. Why is everything, I guess, why are the rules not the same across the Commonwealth? Why is it determined per locality?
Yeah.
So the short answer is because we vote for our officials and they have the authority to run their localities the way that they are within the letter of the law. You know, some make it easier, some make it harder, some have more information available to the public, but each locality has authority to make their own decisions about certain processes. Just like they have the authority to decide who gets charged with what the charges land on, what negotiations are made, what type of plea deals are given, if at all. We do what we can legislatively, but they still run their localities, just like the sheriff have the authority to run their jails the way they see fit, and you always see different processes in each one. It is about authority and who you vote for, so that makes all the difference.
Every Commonwealth's attorney is elected every 4 years, every clerk of court is elected every 4 years, and they can run their localities as they see fit. They both have a lot of power to do that.
When is that election?
One of those elections, the counties,
Counties
so they alternate every 2 years as the counties and the cities. This year is the counties. So like Arlington County, Loudoun County, Chesterfield, they all have prosecutor elections this November. And then in 2 years, it'll be the cities.
So the city is not next year.
No, the city Commonwealth attorneys will be in 2025.
So when does that?
In 2021.
Oh, I was every 2 years. I'm sorry.
They're elected to 4-year terms. So the cities go 2021, 2025, 2029. The counties go 2019, 2023, 2027.
They alternate.
Math.
And then,
Yes, sir.
So I'm understanding, I heard that elected officials, they can run their locality the way they choose. You know what I'm saying?
To an extent, yeah, I think.
Even if it's outside of the United States Constitution?
No, they have limits. Yeah, that's one big limit. Sure.
So what constitutes the right do a convict have?
So prosecutors can make all kinds of decisions about who to charge, what to charge, how many things to drop in a plea agreement. When it comes to the subject we're talking about today, record sealing and expungement, they can decide whether or not they're going to object, how strenuously they're going to object, and what kind of evidence they're going to present in opposition to your petition.
Yeah, I'm just curious because rehabilitation is also part of the process. So there's two amendments that I think that may apply to a convict. I think it would be the 14th and the 8th amendment, with this 14th being due process, the 8th being protection against cruel and unusual punishment. And okay, I stayed incarcerated 31 years. But the whole time I was incarcerated, right, I did not have one institution in practice. Not one. I obtained 3 trades, and I still find it difficult even now. I've been out for 7 years involved. I don't see where rehabilitation is being applied at all or recognized.
Well, starting back in 1994, when George Allen called a special session to have legislators abolish discretionary parole in Virginia and enact truth in sentencing so that everyone would have to serve at least 85% of a felony sentence. We have had a system based on punishment, not based on rehabilitation.
Yeah, well, if rehabilitation is part of the process.
I agree.
I agree. In theory, it's part of the process. You're expected to be, you always here, be a productive member of society. And you come from incarceration, you come from conviction, because I didn't go to prison. you still have to climb the ladder to prove that you have been rehabilitated. And it's really about self-rehabilitation, but it's not recognized.
Yeah.
The real thing was not about making sure that people had access to the resources they need. If we go into the reality of it, people had limited resources before they even got into these systems. So you have to, I'm sorry.
I'm sorry.
Go ahead.
The same people who are being released from these institutions, right? Are people who maybe your age so neighbor. And if rehabilitation is not recognized and an individual attempts to rehabilitate themselves and then are released and he or she is still being punished. You know, isn't that a violation? Isn't it a violation of the constitutional right? I mean,
That sounds like a reparations conversation.
why would the taxpayer pay for teachers and vocational training supervisors to come inside the school? What?
Felonization is the most costly thing that we don't get. And
Okay.
keeping classes of people is what
I understand
generational
clearly. I understand that process clearly. You know, as far as I'm concerned, I understand that, you know, this country don't want but two classes. It's on rich and poor, they want another class to move on the way. I understand that clearly. That's the way we have been going, that's the way we are here. You know, but if you don't recognize people who are trying to change their lives, they can be a productive citizen in this society, then you setting a real messed up road now that is going to be a sledgehammer to our society.
So I'm not disagreeing with you.
I'm just busy, you know. I'm
And
sorry,
as we wrap, because it's 2:52, all I can say is vote, run, serve, lead. This is one small piece of making sure that people get their dignity back, and people don't always have to answer to that question. But unfortunately, everybody will not qualify right away. We will keep fighting to make sure that everybody has access, but this is one small caveat in the wheel of what mass incarceration is and has been for centuries, since we got rid of chattel slavery, since when the Jamestown banks, we bought people over and made them into property and put value into the work and capital instead of people. We are here to make sure that people are empowered and people have what they need. And we don't get everything that we want right away, but everything does not happen in one session. Everything does not happen in 1 year. This bill was a product of decades of unseen work by many people. I have become a layperson expert because I'm a nerd and I need to know things because I don't believe in people just telling me things and me like taking it in. I have to dig and dig and dig and dig. But it didn't just start with me and my situation and my family and my friends. People came before me who fought and fought and fought for this. So I want you all to understand that this is not the end. This is not the end all be all. And as long as we keep fighting together and demand what we want, not just wait for what people say that we can have, then we change the processes, then we change the systems. And if we really believe that our neighbors, our loved ones, our brothers and sisters deserve what's best, we gotta keep showing up, even when it's the unpopular thing to do. Even when so thank you. Thank you.
Thank you, everyone.